Every athlete carries a mental highlight reel, a version of you at your best, whether that's a season, a game, a stretch of a couple weeks where everything's clicking, and that version becomes the standard. That's the reference point. That's what you go back on. Like, okay, that's the great me. And when you're not that, then who are you? And you feel like you failed. What's happening isn't failure, it's friction. It's that gap between who you were and who you were being asked to become. And that gap, living in that gap, feeling that gap can be really uncomfortable. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. The discomfort is the work. Most athletes don't view it that way. They frame it as proof that something's broken. And that framing is what breaks them. And so that's what this episode is about. It's just the truth about what it costs when you are gripping so tight to that past self, you can't become who you need to be. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Next Season Podcast, episode 43. And I want to dig a little bit deeper into a story that I shared in the very first episodes of this podcast way back in the day. Because it's springtime, and as we begin a new baseball season, it's a time to reset. It's time to start fresh, right? That's what spring is about. And, we had the new year, and now it's spring. We're coming out of hibernation, and it's a time to reset, time to start fresh, time to let go of the past. It's your new opportunity to go out and play, like to create your new season, your next season, to play with joy. Just go out there and have fun. And this is a perspective and a mindset that I wish that I had when I was 20, because that's when this story took place. That's what this is all about. And it's the story of when I quit. And I don't mean quit in like a soft medical formal sense. I don't mean like I stepped away. It's not, I decided to focus on other things, even though that's what I told people. And that's what I told myself for years. That was the subtle justification and really it was excuses of what I did. But the truth is simple. I quit. Over winter break of my sophomore year in college, I went into my coach's office and I told him I was done. And the real reason, wasn't the injuries, it wasn't the slump, it wasn't the competition level. Deep down, it was because I knew I couldn't let go of who I used to be. I was holding on so tight to that version of me, and I couldn't let it go. A lot of regret, a lot of shame, lots of memories missed, opportunities lost, and trying to understand it. And again, I'm grateful for all of that, because I wouldn't be where I know I wouldn't be where I'm at today if I had stuck. Like, life could be very different. But you still have those feelings, right? And this is what happens to athletes at every level, every season, all the time. And maybe it's happening to you right now. And so that's what this episode is about. It's not about frameworks. It's not about tools, right? It's just the truth about what it costs when you are gripping so tight to that past self, you can't become who you need to be. So growing up, I was one of the better players on my teams, youth ball, high school, all the way through. I was never the biggest, certainly never the fastest, not the strongest, never the guy that everyone was scouting, but I competed. And we had a great group of guys, like a tight group of guys. I talked about this in some of the earlier episodes. We had great chemistry. We won a lot. And it wasn't because any of us were elite athletes. We weren't studs. It's because we played hard, we played together, and we had fun. And the culture in the dugout and on the field, like, the chemistry was there, the culture was there, and the identity that went along with it, like, I can play, I belong, I win. That felt solid. And through all the bullcrap of my teenage years, right? Like a nasty divorce, home life, dysfunctional home life. In high school, I was working 2 jobs while in school and playing sports. I had a very immature and unhealthy relationship with a girlfriend, like doing just enough in school to get by. Didn't understand the importance of sleep and nutrition. So when I would get home late from work, if I did homework, it was a little bit, and then it was video games. Very late, very poor sleep, very poor nutrition, navigating social life, all of it, right? I could still go out and play, and I did well. I say all that not for pity or woe was me, but because maybe you're experiencing some of this something similar, or you can relate. By the time that I was a junior and senior in high school, I was among the better players in the area, but I wasn't getting recruited. And deep down, I knew why. I was distracted. I wasn't putting in the work. I was riding on talent and history. And I kept telling myself I didn't need to do more because I never had to before. Talent isn't enough. And when I got to college, I walked in thinking I compete right away. And I wasn't naive. Like I knew I wasn't going to start. I knew that from day one, but I thought I'd play. And what hit me was the reality. Everyone around me was the best player on their high school team. Everyone around me was all county, all district, all state. These weren't just good athletes. They were guys who worked for it and earned it. And I was just another guy and I struggled. So that reality hit me, but I wasn't hitting, right? A rough fall season, barely any playing time, injuries, obviously a slump. It got into my head. And it wasn't a slump that lasted for like a week or two. It lasted from day one fall season through probably March. Bad grades, bad headspace, and underneath all of it was this constant loop of what happened to me? Like, why can't I play like I used to? Why can't I do the things I used to do? Like, where is this coming from? My mechanics are off. My headspace is off. It wasn't fun. I was looking for the player I was 2 years earlier. I was trying to recreate a feeling, a version of myself that no longer existed at that level. So as I got through freshman year, got home in the summer, told myself I was going to reset, had a good summer. The summer between freshman and fall, our freshman and sophomore year was good. Went into the fall season, that was decent. I wasn't back where I 100% confident, but I was feeling a lot better. I knew I was in line to compete for a job. And then over winter break, sophomore year, I quit. And it wasn't because I couldn't do it. Like I knew if I could get into I knew going into the spring season, I had a chance to start. I had a chance to compete. So all these fears and pressure of performance anxiety and imposter syndrome and again holding on to that past got the better of me and I just shut down. And looking back, I knew that I could have played. I was holding on so tight to the player I used to be that I didn't have my hands free to build the player, the person that I needed to become. So why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you because I know exactly what that grip feels like. And I don't want it to cost you what it cost me. And here's what I've come to understand through all of this. And this is years of work, guys. Every athlete carries a mental highlight reel, a version of you at your best, whether that's a season, a game, a stretch of a couple weeks where everything's clicking. And that version becomes the standard. That's the reference point. That's what you go back on. Like, okay, that's the great me. And when you're not that, then who are you? And you feel like you're failing. That reference point, that standard, that version is the proof that you belong. It's the evidence of all the work that you've done. And so many athletes that I work with, active athletes and athletes, Atlas athletes, I ask them this. Like, when were you at your best? What were you doing? What did it feel like? And you want to find those specific moments and those specific highlight reels and you want to capture them and you want to replay them vividly, like very specifically, because that's still you. And so when you have those moments where you're feeling frustrated, you can anchor yourself back to that highlight reel that you have. And that's not a bad thing until it becomes the only thing. And when you start performing for that past version of yourself, something shifts. You're not playing to become somebody, you're playing trying to return. And the problem there is you can't go back there, right? That's evidence. That's a piece of evidence that you can reflect on, that you can pull from, but that can't be where you live because that field you don't play on that field anymore. You're not playing against that competition anymore. The competition's changed. The level has changed. You've changed. The old you lived in a different context, a different season. And so trying to replay that is like watching a film on a team you're never going to face again. The past self trap sounds like, I used to hit 350, 380, 400. What's wrong with me? I'm batting 270 right now or 240. Last year I was a starter and now I can't even get in the game. I used to be the guy that they could count on, the guy that comes up clutch in the key moments, or the defensive replacement, whatever that role was. Why can't I be that guy anymore? And here's what's actually happening in your brain when you're stuck in that loop. Your nervous system is designed to protect you. And when there's a gap between that identity that you hold and the player that you believe you are and the results you're getting, your brain reads that as a threat. So again, your brain sees this version of you, and that gap is viewed as a threat, not necessarily a physical threat, but a psychological threat. So you're asking yourself, who am I if I'm not that guy anymore? If I'm not playing anymore, if I'm not performing like that anymore, who am I? And it's your identity spirals. And again, your brain treats that in the same way it responds to any threat. It goes into protection mode. So it's tight muscles, it's overthinking, it's playing not to fail instead of playing to compete and playing to win and playing to have fun, right? You're just playing not to fail and you're playing scared. The part of your brain responsible for performance, right? The focus and the decision making and the trust and the instincts and the flow, that gets hijacked by the part that's just trying to survive. And that's biology. That's not any sign of weakness. That's natural biology. But here's the thing, you can work with that. And the first step is understanding what's actually driving you. What's happening isn't failure, it's friction. It's that gap between who you were and who you were being asked to become. And that gap, living in that gap, feeling that gap can be really uncomfortable. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. The discomfort is the work. Most athletes don't view it that way. They frame it as proof that something is broken. And that framing is what breaks them. That was me. When I was in that gap, in that discomfort throughout my 3 semesters in college, freshman into sophomore year, to the point of going home at Christmas break and dreading signing up for classes for spring semester, to the point where I just shut down and I stared at the screen for probably 3 hours. No exaggeration. I knew at that moment that I was done. That was the gap. That was the discomfort. And that's when I shut down. That's when I quit. Instead of persevering and facing that resistance and breaking through and continuing. So how do you actually let go of that past and get through that gap? First, and this is important, letting go doesn't mean that you forget, right? You don't forget that highlight reel of all the great things. It doesn't mean what you did before doesn't matter. It means you stop using the past as the measuring stick for your present moment. And here's the science behind why this is hard. Your brain is wired for pattern recognition. That's actually how we hit fastballs, right? So there's a really cool video. I'm not going to get into it too much, but at the core of it is the science behind hitting a fastball, and how it's not so much reading the fastball and reacting to it. It's guessing, it's estimating and predicting where that fastball is going to go through pattern recognition. And so when they talk about timing a fastball, that's really what it's about. It's recognizing over countless reps, based upon the spin, based upon the velocity, based upon your timing, based upon the conditions of the field, you are predicting where that's going to, where your point of contact is going to be. And that's what your brain does. And again, this can be the same thing in relationships. This can be the same thing off the field. This can be the same thing for my Atlas athletes who are no longer playing or preparing not to play anymore, right? It's the same pattern recognition. When you hold on to that identity, that success, that belonging, and you hold on to them too tight, the stronger the emotion that is attached to that memory, that feeling, the harder that your brain is going to work to protect it. And so when you try to move on from a version of yourself that felt good, or again, that highlight reel, your brain resists because it doesn't want to let go of that. It's like dealing with a loss, right? When we lose somebody, when we're afraid we're going to lose somebody, we tend to squeeze tighter to that because we're scared we're going to lose it. Sometimes we have to let it go, right? And that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of life. And that's why willpower alone doesn't work. You can't just tell yourself, you can't just will yourself move on, expect it to stick. You have to give your brain something to do with that old version in order to be able to move forward. You have to interrupt. There's an old example, like if I tell you not to think about an elephant, what's the first thing you think about? Right? An elephant, right? If I tell you don't strike out, or you tell yourself don't strike out, what do you think when you step in the box? Where do you think your mind goes? What do you think your mind hears and focuses on? The strikeout, right? And we typically move in the direction of our thoughts. So if you just say, don't think about this or forget about that, you're you're not going to do that. Your brain is not going to recognize that. It's going to recognize what it heard, and it heard strikeout. Okay. So the tools that help here work because they interrupt the pattern and they shift your nervous system out of protection mode and back into performance mode. A controlled exhale, that longer out than in, right? Activates your parasympathetic system and signals safety to your brain. Okay. That's physiology. Okay. That's just one way. That's a one way to re-anchor and reset in that present moment. Simple resets like the snapback routine. I always talk about a snapback routine. Talk about my rubber bands, right? Grit is getting stretched. Resilience is snapping back into place. That physical movement and cue, along with the mental thinking and the thought patterns to say, I am capable of this, or the words of affirmation, a physical cue between pitches. I've been talking about this with athletes. When you step into a box, we kind of do this naturally anyway, but you wipe the box. Or like if you're in the infield, right, you wipe the dirt in front of you. Think about that. When you do that, it's like you're wiping away the past. So instead of just wiping, like it's kind of you're not even thinking about it. It's just something that you do, or you're smoothing out the dirt. Think of it as I'm wiping away the past, and now I'm going to dig in. Okay, you're wiping away the history. That's the movement. That's the interruption movement, combined with a thought pattern, combined with words that you say yourself. Now you've got three sensors or senses that you're activating to create an interruption. Okay. Hat to helmet is another one. When you come off the field, you take your hat off and you put your helmet on. Now you are out of fielding mode and into hitting mode. So if you made an error or a bad throw on the field, when you take your hat off when you get to the dugout, it's done. You're on hitting mode. And if you strike out or you pop out in a key moment, that helmet comes off. You put your hat back on, your glove back on. That at bat is done. Now you're back in fielding mode. Flush it. Those physical cues, along with the words that you tell yourself and the positive thought patterns, are how you interrupt it. Okay, so you can't just tell yourself, forget about it. You have to interrupt it through multiple senses. Okay, again, combining the physical movement, verbal, auditory messages, and positive thought patterns to really anchor that interruption so you can go perform. And when you think about your past version, you acknowledge it. You say that player was real. Right? Again, that you did those things. That season was real. Those accomplishments happened. They're yours. They're mine. I'm proud of them. And then you put them down in the same way you need to do with the failures. Not because they don't matter, because they cannot be your identity moving forward. The athlete that grips so tight to the past, right, is usually the hardest one to coach. Why? Because they're holding on to the past. They're not in the present moment. They're somewhere else. They're back in that version of themselves where things made sense, or things were in flow, or the level of competition wasn't the same, right? Letting go of that version is not giving up. It's making room for what's next. And so when you've put down that old version, or you at least become aware and acknowledge that you need to, how you can interrupt that pattern is you have to build a new version. And this is where a lot of athletes go wrong. They let go of the past self, or they try to, but they don't replace it with anything. And an athlete without an identity is just reacting. You're just drifting. You're playing to survive instead of playing to compete. And so this is where I talk about my create a player framework, right? The created player tool that I have that I work with athletes on. I ask athletes to define who they are right now. Not who you were, but who are you today as a competitor? What are your traits? What are your habits? What are your skills? What are your values? What are your standards? When you're at your best, what does that look like? And yes, there is some identification of looking ahead to the version that you want to become. So some goal setting in here as well. But it's about building your identity and habits around the ideal version of you right now that you can continue to develop and refine and improve as you move forward. What do you value? How do you play? What does your best look like today at this level, at this moment, in this role, in this season? That's your player. That's you. That's your creative player. That's who you go out to perform for. Nobody else. Not last year's version, not the version of your parents talk about, not the version you were in a league that no longer exists, not about what the fans are saying or your coaches are saying. This version, this season, you. When I quit college, I didn't have that. I had a ghost. I had a shadow. I was chasing a shadow. I was chasing a feeling that I remembered. I remembered what it felt like to hit home runs. I remember what it felt like to win. I remember what it felt like to start. Like, not even question if I was going to be in the lineup or not, because I knew I was going to be. But I couldn't recreate it because I never built a new identity for who I needed to be at that new level I was at. I didn't know how to be that guy. I only knew how to be the guy I used to be. And so I was hanging on to the past. And you don't have to make that mistake. Question to sit with, and what I want you to sit with this, not just nod at this, but sit with this question. Who am I as a player right now? Not who I was, not who I'm trying to get back to. Who am I today? And what does that player need to do to compete? That's your work. And for my Atlas athletes, it's the same thing. Your playing days might be over. None of what you accomplished was fake. None of what you failed at was fake, because the failures helped frame you and mold you and strengthen you. So what do you do with that? What can you pull from that experience and character traits that you can pull from to help you create that version of you that needs to perform wherever you're at right now? That's your work. That's your season. Here's what I know to be true. The athletes who last and enjoy, the ones who play through adversity, the ones who play through role changes, through the hard seasons, they're not the ones who hold on so tight to who they were. They're the ones who are willing to reinvent. They're willing to adjust and adapt and evolve, to put down one version and pick up a new one with intention. That's the hardest kind of mental toughness there is, because it requires you to stop protecting yourself from who you used to be and start trusting who you're becoming. And that's scary because it's unknown. You had a great past. Maybe you were the best player on your team. Maybe you had a year that felt like everything was clicking, and maybe you were just the guy. And now it's harder. And the gap between where you were and where you are feels impossible to close, but it's not impossible. But you're not going to close it if you're looking backwards. So right now, reset, build who you are right now, create the player. Okay. Show up in this moment for this play, and then for this season, not the one that's ended. As you go into this season and you go out there and perform, I'm here for you. I'm praying that it's fun. I'm praying that it's challenging. And you go out and you play and have fun, have the time of your life, and that you grow, and that you fail, and you get back up and you compete, and you're a great teammate to others, and you're a great teammate to yourself. Go get yours. Guys, if this episode hit home, the best thing you can do is share it. Send it to an athlete, a parent, a coach who you think might need to hear it. That's how this message reaches the people that it's meant for. And if it made you stop and think about where you are right now, mentally, emotionally, identity-wise, there's something on the website worth checking out. We have 2 assessments. I've got one for active athletes, and I got one for Atlas athletes who are adjusting and navigating a life after sport. No fluff, just an honest snapshot of where you are, about awareness and clarity. And sometimes that's exactly where the work starts. You can find that at nextseasonathletes.com. Hit me up. Let me know what you think. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time.